Henry Mason grew up in the dusty corner of a town most people had never heard of, Maple Ridge. It was the kind of place where the mailman knew your dog's name, and the grocery clerk asked how your grandma was doing. It was home, small, quiet, but full of heart, and in the center of that little world stood one woman, Lila Mason, Henry's mother. She was everything to him: mother, father, best friend, cheerleader. She raised Henry alone after his father disappeared when he was just 2, with no college degree, no relatives nearby, and only a part-time job at the local diner. Lila did what most wouldn't dare. She carried her entire world on tired, blistered feet for Henry. He remembers her hands most. Always busy. Kneading dough at 4 a.m. to bake fresh biscuits for the diner. Scrubbing his dirty baseball uniforms by hand because they couldn't afford a washer. Her hands were cracked, callous, tired, but they never stopped moving for him. Henry didn't know they were poor. To him, home was warm soup, bedtime stories, and the comfort of falling asleep with his mom humming old country songs beside him. But things changed, as they always do. Henry was smart, really smart. He got a scholarship to a top university in the city. Lila cried the day he left, not out of sadness, but pride. She'd made it. She had done the impossible. She raised a boy the world wanted to keep. "Make me proud, Henry," she said, holding his face in her weathered hands. He hugged her quickly, already half looking toward the bus. "I will, Mom. I promise." And he did. In the city, Henry rose like a rocket. Fast, sharp, confident. He cut off his southern accent, changed his wardrobe, got an apartment in a sleek high-rise. Before long, he was making 6 figures in finance, shaking hands with CEOs, sipping overpriced lattes, and forgetting to return his mother's calls. At first, it was innocent. He was busy. Long hours. New life. But over time, those missed calls turned into ignored voicemails. Birthday cards turned into text messages. Visits home turned into polite excuses. Then came the day Lila visited. She'd saved for months, bought a bus ticket, and packed a little bag with some of his favorite homemade cookies. She wore her nicest dress, the one with the tiny blue flowers, and knocked on the door of his apartment, smiling like a kid on Christmas morning. But Henry didn't answer. He was home. He just didn't want his colleagues or his neighbors to see the woman with the country dress and wrinkled eyes, the woman whose presence reminded him too much of where he came from. He watched her through the peephole, heart thudding, hands trembling as she waited, smiled nervously, looked down at the cookies in her hands, then turned and slowly walked away. She left the cookies at his doorstep, and with them, a note. "Just want to see your face. I'm proud of you. Love, Mom." Henry picked up the note, stared at it for a moment, then tossed it in the trash. The truth was ugly but simple. Henry had outgrown his mother, or so he thought. At work, he was praised. At networking events, he was respected. On social media, he was thriving. But at night, in that luxury apartment, something started to shift. He'd lie awake, thinking about her hands, the way she'd cup his cheek when he cried, the way she'd run her fingers through his hair when he was sick, the way she never let go, even when the world told her she should. He remembered how she'd sit through thunderstorms with a flashlight so he wouldn't be scared, how she sold her wedding ring to buy him a winter coat, how she used to hum while folding his shirts, whispering, "You're going to go far one day, baby boy. Just don't forget where you came from." But he had forgotten. And in doing so, he had abandoned the one person who never stopped loving him. He didn't know it then, but that moment, standing on the other side of the door, pretending not to be home, would become the greatest regret of his life. And all it took was one knock to change everything. Lila stood in front of the tall gray building, clutching the small tin of cookies in her hands, the way a child might hold a fragile bird. Her fingers trembled, not from age, but from hope. Hope that the surprise visit would be a sweet one, that her son, Henry, would throw open the door, wrap his arms around her, and say, "Mom, what are you doing here?" with that big boyish smile she hadn't seen in years. It was a long journey from Maple Ridge to the city. 3 buses, 1 cab, and a whole lot of walking. But Lila had made tougher journeys before, like raising a son alone without a penny to her name. So this was nothing. She took a deep breath and knocked, then waited. She could hear footsteps inside, a shuffle, a pause, the kind of stillness that isn't silence, it's hesitation. "Henry," she called gently, voice quivering just enough to give her away. "It's me, Mama." No response, but he was in there. She knew her own son's shadow behind a curtain, his nervous habit of pacing, the faint smell of the cologne she had bought him years ago at the Christmas church sale. Lila smiled and straightened her dress. Maybe he was just surprised. Maybe he needed a second. She knocked again, a little lighter this time. "I brought you cookies. Your favorite. Peanut butter with the little chocolate chips. Thought I'd surprise you." Still nothing. Minutes passed. Then more. People walked by in sleek suits and hurried shoes, barely sparing a glance at the old woman standing in the hallway with her carefully combed gray hair and trembling hands. She glanced at her reflection in the apartment's hallway mirror. Worn face, lines etched by time and sacrifice. She looked like someone from another world, someone who didn't belong in this modern city. But she was someone. She was his mother, and she had raised him with every ounce of strength she had. Lila waited another 10 minutes, then gently placed a cookie tin on the welcome mat. Beside it, she tucked a little note she had written on the bus. "Just want to see your face. I'm proud of you. Love, Mom." Then, with slow steps, she turned and walked down the hallway. Behind the door, Henry stood frozen. He had heard every word, seen her through the peephole. He'd even taken a step toward the door at one point, but he didn't open it. Why? Shame? Embarrassment? Pride? Maybe all three. She didn't fit into his new life. She didn't belong in this world of polished shoes and glass elevators. The world where mothers wore pearls, not aprons. Where conversations happened over wine, not homemade pie. And yet, as he stood in that silence, listening to the soft sound of her footsteps fading away, something inside him cracked, like the thinnest layer of ice breaking over a buried lake. The next morning, the cookie tin was gone. He'd opened it, stared at the note, then tucked it deep into a drawer without reading it again. Days passed, then weeks. He didn't call, and she didn't visit again. But she did write. Every Sunday night, like clockwork, a letter would arrive in soft cursive handwriting, always with news about Maple Ridge, a few dollar bills just in case, and one line that never changed. "I'm proud of you, Henry. Love you always, Mama." He read them. Sometimes. Other times, he didn't even open the envelope. They began to pile up on his nightstand, unopened and slightly dusty, like little ghosts he wasn't ready to face. What he didn't know was that those letters were more than ink on paper. They were lifelines. They were her way of knocking on a door that he had closed, not just physically, but emotionally. You see, Lila wasn't hurt because he was busy. She understood life got hectic. She wasn't upset because he didn't have time. She was hurt because he made no time. None at all. What she wanted wasn't grand. She didn't need money. She didn't care about his suits or his high-rise apartment. She just wanted to hear him say, "Hi, Mom." She just wanted to know that after all the nights she held him when he had fevers, after all the second jobs she took to pay for his books, after all the birthdays she spent alone while he was away in the city, that somewhere inside him, her love still lived. But Henry wasn't ready to face that truth. Not yet. So the door stayed closed. And on the other side of that door, a mother's silent tears fell. Not for herself, but for a boy who had everything except the one thing that made it all matter. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when the letter came. Henry was at his desk in the corner office, overlooking the city skyline. His life had become exactly what he dreamed of: designer suits, stock options, fancy dinners with clients. But lately, the shine had started to dull. Something felt missing, like an empty chair at a family table. His assistant dropped a stack of mail onto his desk without a word. Bills, flyers, a thank you note from a client, and then the envelope. It was small, off-white, no return address. But he recognized the handwriting instantly, his mother's. But something was different. The letters had stopped weeks ago. He'd barely noticed at first, maybe even felt relieved. No more guilt pressed into paper. No more unopened envelopes staring at him from his nightstand. But this envelope wasn't like the others. It was heavier, thicker, and it was the last one he would ever get. He hesitated, heart suddenly pounding in his chest. Slowly, he opened it. Inside was a folded sheet of lined paper, and beneath it, a card from Maple Ridge County Hospice. Dear Mr. Mason, your mother, Lila Mason, passed away peacefully last Sunday morning. In her final days, she asked that we send you this letter. With sympathy, Hospice Care Team. His hands began to tremble. No. He stared at the note for what felt like an eternity before he unfolded the paper with shaking fingers. My sweet Henry, if you're reading this, I guess the good Lord finally decided it was time for me to go. Don't be sad, baby. I'm okay. I had a good life. Not an easy one, but a life full of love, and most of that love came from you. I know we drifted apart, and I don't blame you. Life gets loud, and the heart can go quiet if we're not careful. But I never stopped loving you. Not for a single second. I kept all your school drawings, even the silly one where I look like a potato. I still made your favorite soup on your birthday, even if it was just for me. I watched the news just to catch glimpses of your company name. I was proud of you, always, but my biggest hope was never for you to be rich or famous. Henry, it was for you to be kind, to remember that love is louder than success, that people matter more than titles, that no matter how far you go, you carry your roots in your chest. And son, you don't have to carry guilt now. Just carry love. That's all I ever wanted. Love you always. Mama. Henry didn't cry at first. He sat motionless, the letter resting in his lap like a final heartbeat. Then the flood came. Tears he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years broke through. Hot, ashamed, unstoppable. He cried for the birthdays missed, the unanswered calls, the unopened letters. He cried for the hug he didn't give her at the door, for the words he should have said, for the years he couldn't get back. He left work early that day. No meetings, no explanations. He just walked, through the rain, through the noise, through the very city that had once made him feel so important and now felt unbearably hollow. That night, in his penthouse suite, surrounded by awards, glass, and silence, Henry dug into his drawer and pulled out every letter she had ever sent. He opened them all, one by one, like trying to turn back time, like searching for the warmth he had spent years running from. In one of them, she had written, "You'll always be my boy, even when the world forgets I exist." That's the thing about mothers. We love even when it hurts. That line hit like a punch to the chest. The next morning, Henry called on a leave of absence. He didn't care what the board thought. He didn't care about missed deadlines. What mattered now was home. He booked a train ticket to Maple Ridge. It was the first time he'd been back in over 10 years. As the train slowed into the familiar, quiet station, Henry looked out the window and saw the little diner his mother used to work at, the corner store where she bought his favorite candy after school, the church where she once sang in the choir, smiling as he clapped from the front pew. At the cemetery on the hill, he stood at her grave, holding the letter. "I'm sorry, Mama," he whispered, kneeling in the grass. "I forgot what mattered, but I remember now. I remember you." There were no crowds, no cameras, just a sun, a grave, and the sound of the wind through the trees. But in that moment, Henry felt more human than he had in years. He sat there for hours, talking to her like she was right beside him, because maybe in some way she was. Sometimes it takes losing everything to remember what was most important all along. And sometimes the loudest wake-up call comes in the quiet of a letter from home. The wind was gentle that morning in Maple Ridge. It swept over the hills and whispered through the cemetery trees, as if the town itself was exhaling a quiet sigh of sorrow. Henry stood alone beside his mother's grave, a simple white stone nestled between wildflowers and time-worn soil. He had read her final letter a dozen times now, each word etched deeper into his memory, each sentence a reminder of the love he had taken for granted. The pain wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It lingered, a quiet ache in the bones, in the heart, in the soul. He hadn't just lost his mother. He had lost the years he could have spent with her, the smiles he could have shared, the hands he could have held. And that kind of loss never truly heals. Henry sat down in the grass, resting his back against the oak tree that shaded her headstone. He didn't speak at first. He didn't know what to say. But then, slowly he began. "Do you remember when I broke my arm in 4th grade? You ran from work. Still had flour on your apron. You kissed my forehead and told me I was brave, even though I cried like a baby." He smiled, his voice cracking. "You always made me feel like I was enough, even when I wasn't, especially when I wasn't." He closed his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Mama. I shut you out. I let the world convince me that love had to look a certain way. Expensive dinners, designer clothes, corporate titles. But you show me love every day in ways I didn't see until now." He exhaled shakily. "And now I give up every deal, every dollar, just to sit at that old kitchen table with you. One more cup of coffee. One more Sunday morning. One more chance." But life doesn't rewind. It only moves forward. And that realization, that permanent finality, became the spark Henry needed to change. The next few weeks in Maple Ridge were unlike anything Henry had experienced since childhood. He visited the diner where his mom once worked and donated enough money to repair the leaky roof she used to complain about. But more than that, he started helping out, not just with money but with time, with presence. He washed dishes in the back with teens working summer jobs. He filled coffee cups and wiped down tables. And when a local single mom came in with 2 kids and no cash, he quietly paid the bill before she even noticed. Not because he wanted praise, but because he knew his mother would have done the same. Henry also spent time with the church, choir his mom used to sing with. They still remembered her voice, her laugh, the way she brought cookies to every rehearsal. One of the ladies, Miss Bernice, hugged him tight one Sunday after service. "You're Lila's boy," she said teary-eyed. "You got her smile, but not her cooking." He laughed. It was the first real laugh he'd had in months. But the biggest change came quietly, in the way he listened, in the way he started to see people, really see them. He wasn't chasing deals anymore. He was chasing connection. One rainy evening, much like the day he got the letter, Henry sat in his childhood home, now quiet and still. The wallpaper was peeling in the corners. The furniture hadn't changed since the 90s, but it felt like a palace to him now. He found an old photo album beneath his mother's bed, dusty, worn, but full of treasures. There she was, young, smiling, holding a baby version of him wrapped in a blue blanket. There were birthday parties with homemade cakes, school recitals, fishing trips where neither of them caught anything but laughter. Page after page, he watched his life unfold through her eyes. Not the high-rise buildings, not the business deals, but the moments, the simple, sacred moments he had rushed through for years. And as he turned the last page, he found something taped to the inside cover, a tiny note, yellowed with age. "Henry, don't ever forget where you came from. You were born from love." Nam. That night, Henry made a decision. He wasn't going back to the city, not to the penthouse, not to the meetings. He was going to stay, to rebuild the house, to volunteer at the hospice that cared for his mother, to speak at schools about kindness, humility, and the power of never taking love for granted. He started a foundation in Lila's name, one that helped aging parents reconnect with their children one letter at a time. Handwritten, just like she used to write. The foundation's slogan? It's never too late to knock on the door. And every year on his mom's birthday, Henry bakes a fresh batch of peanut butter cookies, the kind with chocolate chips, and hands them out at the diner. He tells anyone who'll listen, "These were my mom's favorite. And if you have a mom, call her today." Henry will always carry regret. It never disappears. But now, that regret has a purpose. It pushes him to be better, to show up, to love louder. Because what he learned, far too late, is that the real success in life isn't about what you earn, it's about who you hold on to. And now, Henry holds on to her memory, tighter than ever. Broken heart regret can drown you, or it can wake you up, seedling and sometimes The hardest journeys lead you exactly where you need to be all along. The autumn leaves danced outside the community center as Henry adjusted the microphone. He looked out at the group of high school students seated in front of him, some with arms folded, others tapping their phones, a few making fleeting eye contact, unsure what this old man in a cardigan could possibly say that might matter to them. He took a breath, then began. "You ever think about how fast everything moves?" he asked. "How we're always racing to be somewhere else, older, richer, more successful?" A few students shrugged. A couple nodded. Henry smiled gently. "I used to be like that, too, always rushing, chasing, until one day I realized I'd been running from the one thing that mattered most." He paused. "Love." The room grew quieter. Now I know love might sound soft, like something you say on Valentine's Day or write in a cheesy greeting card. But I'm not talking about that kind of love. I'm talking about the kind you don't always see, the kind that shows up every day in quiet ways, the kind that forgives you when you don't deserve it, the kind that's waiting at the kitchen table when the rest of the world walks out. He looked down for a moment, then met their eyes again. "I'm talking about my mother." Henry went on to share his story, not as a lecture, but as a confession, a window into a life where success had a high cost and love had come with no invoice, yet he'd somehow missed its worth. He talked about the long days in the city, chasing deals, managing teams, flying first class. "I had everything that said I was winning," he said, "but the truth is, I was losing the game that really counted." He told them about the letter, the day everything stopped, and the long, painful drive back to a town he thought he'd outgrown, only to find it held the only roots that ever really mattered. "My mother's name was Lila," he said, his voice catching slightly. "She didn't have much, but she gave me everything. And I wasted years thinking I was above the life she built." He looked out over the quiet room. Don't make that mistake. One boy, sitting in the back in a worn-out hoodie, raised his hand. "What would you do differently?" he asked. Henry chuckled softly. "Almost everything," he said. "But I'll start with this. I'd call her more. I'd show up on holidays. I'd listen when she talked about her garden, even if I didn't care about tomatoes. I'd tell her I loved her, not just once a year, but every time I left the room." He leaned in, voice low but firm. "Because one day there won't be another room, or another phone call, or another chance. And I promise you, you don't want to live with that silence." Over the next hour, something changed in the room. The folded arms dropped. The phones went dark, and a few eyes shimmered with quiet emotion. Henry didn't try to impress them. He wasn't there to sell success. He was there to give them something more valuable: perspective. He told them about how he'd started a foundation in his mother's name, about the letters children now write to their aging parents, some reconnecting after decades apart. He shared the stories of forgiveness, of redemption, of simple phone calls that save broken hearts. "Some of the toughest men I've met," Henry said, "are the ones who finally told their moms, 'I'm sorry. I love you. Thank you.'" He looked at them one by one. "You want to be brave? Be that guy." After the talk, a girl named Mia came up with tears in her eyes. "My dad hasn't spoken to his mom in 10 years, she said. "Do you think it's too late?" Henry placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's never too late," he whispered. "But don't wait." That evening, as Henry walked back through Maple Ridge, the sky was painted in gold and crimson. The trees rustled softly, like his mother's voice in the wind. He passed by the diner where she once worked. Inside, a young waitress laughed with a customer, her smile warm and familiar. For a second, he saw his mother there, flower on her cheek, heart full of joy, handing him a grilled cheese sandwich cut into perfect triangles. He smiled, not with regret this time, but with peace, because even though he couldn't go back and rewrite his beginning, he could still change the ending. And that's what he had done. Now, every fall, Henry speaks at schools across the country. He doesn't bring PowerPoints. He doesn't talk about stocks or sales or six-figure salaries. He brings a shoebox. Inside it are three things: a photo of his mother holding him as a baby, a letter she wrote before she passed, a note card that reads, "Call him. Visit them. Forgive them. Tell them before it's too late. He holds up the card and tells every room the same thing. This isn't a message from me. This is from someone who loved me when I didn't deserve it. And chances are someone like that is in your life too. He pauses. Don't make them wait. Red heart. The biggest lessons in life don't come from a boardroom. They come from a quiet kitchen, a wrinkled hand, and a heart that never stopped loving you. Telephone receiver, make the call. Say the words. Show up. Dove, and if you still can, go home.